So if you've been watching the series thus far, you've seen us create some basic creep types, create helper functions for both the creep object and the room position object. And now the next thing that we're really having to deal with is we're not utilizing the full amount of energy available in these energy sources in 300 ticks before they regenerate, which means we have some efficiency loss. But in order to extract faster from this source, we're going to have larger creep types that utilize more work parts. And the only way to do that is to have more energy available for spawning. So then the problem becomes filling these extensions. So that's the next thing we're going to work on. We want a creep that can fill up the tower and the extensions in the room. So what we're going to modify is the harvester, and we're just going to change his logic a little bit. First thing we're going to have to do is put him in the working, not working state. So for that, we're just going to go ahead and go over to builder and copy over this logic. I'm going to copy it entirely, and then we can modify it in here. So remember working. So same deal here. If there's no energy, cancel the working state, and if there is no free capacity left, go back into the working state. And we're going to make this one filling. If creep memory working, var targets equals creep room find. So here we're actually going to change instead of finding construction sites, we're going to go over here to room find, and we're going to find my structures. So find my structures is going to loop through all the game objects in the room. If we type this in console, we probably can actually see the array. I can't do creep. Game.rooms. Rooms. W 7 and 4. Alright, so that it displays all the different structures, spawn, extensions, and the tower. So right now it's probably okay that we don't filter this, but in the future what we're going to want to do is this right here. We want to eliminate structures that don't require filling. So targets equals filter targets function structure. We're going to abbreviate structure with struct. You can use whatever abbreviations you want. You don't have to necessarily follow this code exactly, but this just is to show you some basic like coding techniques and like how you lay out this, how you modify the different states, things like that. So what we want to do is filter this targets array to make sure that all the structures are valid. So there's different structure types are struct dot type equals structure underscore tower, I believe. So you can find these guys in the documentation again. And under constants. So two things. There's the constants and this right here. So structure has an parameter called structure type. So that's what we're going to evaluate through. So if the struct being passed is of the correct structure type, we're going to have it return true. And then going back to the documentation, we want to find the different constants for structures. So there's structure spawn, structure extension. So the ones we're going to be filling are the spawn, extension, and the towers. So we want it to return true if the structure type is a tower, or copy this guy over here again, or so structure extension, and then structure spawn. So if the type is a tower, extension, or spawn, this will return true and leave it in the targets array. Okay, so there's actually two conditions we want. The first thing is if it's the correct structure type. The second thing is if it needs energy. So return if any of these return true, and struct dot store. So let's go over here to the documentation again. So all structure objects are going to have, well, a lot of the structure objects, like extension, for instance, is going to have the store parameter, and the store parameter has this one, get free capacity. So we want to see if the get free capacity for energy is greater than 0. So if it's correct type and it needs energy, it's going to leave it in this targets array. And if there's elements in the targets array, we want it to move to the first one and transfer. Let target equals, okay, so stepping this out, find closest target to creep, and then we want it to move to the target and then transfer energy. All right, so first thing, let target equal creep dot room dot, let's go back to the documentation. There's a function that will help us here. Room Here we go. Room position. Find closest by path, which is a little more expensive. So this is the CPU cost. So pathing operations are pretty expensive compared to this, which is a little bit better. This is going to be the XY position using like the Pythagorean theorem to find the distance. So this is probably sufficient. So what we're going to do is pass the objects into it, and it will return the closest one. So it's room position. So we're going to do creep pos, which is the shorthand for room position. Find closest by range targets. Now what this is going to do is return a single structure from this list, whichever one is closest. And then we're going to do move to the target. So if creep plus is near to target, so if it's near to if you remember from last episode, it's next to the target, then we want it to do the transfer. So let's go back to the documentation and make sure I have the right syntax and the right function. It's creep. There's a transfer function, and it takes a target and a resource type. and an optional amount. So our target is going to be the structure we've defined. So creep transfer target, and the resource is going to be resource energy. Now, the second part of our function here, if the creep is not next to the target, we want to do creep dot move to target. And we'll delete that guy. So an overview of this harvester role, things it's going to do. If it has no energy, it's going to put itself in a non-working state and begin to harvest with this function here. If it's out of energy, it's going to, well, if it's full of energy, it's going to go back into the working state and start executing this function. What this function does is loops through all the targets, finds the closest one, moves to it, transfers the energy. So let's save and go back to the game and see how this worked. So let's find some of our harvesters. There's some. Filling. Oh, there's one. Let's see how this guy works. So it looks like he's going to move towards this tower. Let's see if he transfers. Yep. So there they are. They're filling this tower. And looks like they filled an extension. So now in the next video, we can either work on tower defense, or we can work on spawning larger creeps.